Welcome to Talking with the Experts. This is where we discuss great ideas to take your business to the next level. How do we know these ideas work? Well, it's because we're talking with business owners who are using these ideas. Business owners who have years of experience and expertise. All things business by business owners for business owners. And now, here is your host, Rose Davidson.
Hi, I'm Rose Davidson from Talking with the Experts. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Global Glamping Charities for their valued support. Global Glamping Charities, solving homelessness in all its forms. Reach out to them at globalglamping.org.
Talking with the Experts.
To be successful as a lead of your business, you need to have a strategy on how to lead the people you work with. In episode 441, Melissa Carson speaks to this and explains.
No, and I think that's important. I think it's also, a good example is if you're going to add a new program or change a benefit, to getting feedback from, key stakeholders like a line employee, the most junior employees, like how is this going to impact? I had a personal experience where I was rolling out what I thought was the best policy, and I had leadership buy-in, but it didn't really hit as well as thought it was going to hit because we didn't take into account some things that we weren't considering. And so I think making sure you're getting bottoms up input to anything you're trying to do, any change you're creating, I think is really important. I think it starts at the top. I mean, the CEO, COO, depending on how the company is organized, needs to look at it to say, this is important.
Talking with the Experts.
Hello, welcome to Talking with the Experts. I'm your host, Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners. You can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. So to be successful as a leader in your business, you need to have a strategy on how to lead the people you work with. As well, your mindset is key around how you think about your business. For scaling businesses, people strategies need to evolve just like your business or marketing strategy. It comes down to intentional focus. My next guest, Melissa Carson, is going to be talking on that very subject. And Melissa partners with scaling organisations to evaluate their strategic talent needs and define solutions to address the business agenda. With 25 plus years working in large successful organisations as a global HR leader, Melissa has learned what works and what doesn't work and is now focused on using those learnings and industry best practices to benefit fast-growing small to mid-sized organisations. Melissa is passionate about helping scaling businesses harness the full potential of their employees through powerful people strategies to achieve their organisational goals. Welcome, Melissa. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. So how did you get into HR? I mean, because it's a very detailed niche.
Well, I kind of fell into it. Honestly, early in my career, I was in a management training program at a bank. You did rotations through every department, and I ended up in to do a rotation in the personnel department. And I kind of enjoyed it, and ended up leaving there for a little while, but ended up going back into a recruiting position there, and kind of liked that. And then went on to an HR and got my master's degree, and that was the end of it after that. But it wasn't something I started out saying, oh, I really want to be in HR. In fact, my dad counseled me not to. He's like, those are the people you're going to be fired first if there's ever a layoff. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, my daughter's, she's currently working in HR, and I actually completed a diploma some years ago in HR management. And I really liked because it aligned with my philosophies on managing staff. So I really like working in that sort of area. But yeah, it's how things evolve over time.
Definitely, it's definitely a different field than it was when I first started.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, just the whole, equal opportunity and diversity and all those sort of things, weren't around in the 80s a lot. So yeah, now it's full on, isn't it?
Definitely is different.
Yeah. So how can small, medium, large organizations harness their HR potential?
I think it first starts with looking at, depending what your business strategy is for the organization, making sure then you have a people strategy that aligns to that. So if you, for instance, are growing in a specific market, you might say, okay, we just need to hire, 10 new salespeople. But that's probably not the full answer, because if you're hiring 10 new salespeople, then you also have to be able to service that work. So you need a profile of people to service that work. And if you're opening a new market, you might have to understand the culture of that market. And you may need, tools. If you're creating new offerings to sell in that market, you need training. And so thinking about the holistic piece of, if my business strategy is shifting to this, what are all the people implications that I need to consider so that I have the best likelihood to get the business performance that I want from that strategy? So I think working in lockstep with business strategy, just as you would, create a marketing strategy or a financial strategy, you need to have a people strategy so that you are doing things intentionally. I see lots of great HR programs and organizations, but they may not be aligned to the business strategy. They're great things to do, but are they helping to achieve the business strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It has to work hand in hand with everything else in the organization. It just can't be a standalone sort of thing. But a lot of people still in this day and age don't know how HR works. And to me is, mind-blowing, because it's been around for a long time. I mean, I suppose, I don't know why, if we just said it's a personnel department, people probably would understand it more, but they still don't understand what human resources means. And I think it's a nicer term for personnel department. I understand that. But yeah, people just don't understand how they work. They just reckon they sit around all day and do nothing.
And I think that, HR people and, often get a bad rap. And I think there are different parts of personnel departments, HR departments, or now a lot of organizations are renaming and rebranding to the people organization. Mm-hmm. And so I think the easy part to understand is, hey, do you recruit? Do you do benefits? Do you do payroll? Administer my benefits? Those are the easy things in the more traditional operations and personnel side of it. But the HR field has really exploded to be, how do we make our employees successful? How do we drive business value through people? And because we know people are the engine for every product and service. Every innovation is really coming because some person is helping create an algorithm for the AI. Even if AI is doing a variety of the things, there's a person or a group of people that are focused on, how do we get the best of this technology? And so how do you get the best from your people is really what an HR people personnel department is all about in today's world. So it's less about tools and process, et cetera. That's obviously a piece of it, but it's more around how do we get the best out of
absolutely.
everybody.
And that's what they're basically there for. I mean, as you say, not just to do the payroll and not to do the hiring and the firing, but they're there to make sure that everyone's happy, everyone's got all the things that they need to have a really great workplace, and put all those trainings in place if the business is lacking in those. And so you're right, HR does get a bad rap because they just think they're soft and not, but they're quite busy. I mean, if you didn't, with the HR department, they're quite one of the busiest departments in an organization.
Right. And I do think there are probably people in those roles that do give the profession a bad name. They are the police, policing different behaviors to protect the organization from risk, and maybe doing it in a way that doesn't best serve the broader organization, but I think there is an opportunity to change the mindset. And I think one of the key things that a lot of HR professionals are doing now is, how do we help the leaders, the team leaders, the super frontline leaders, middle tier, et cetera? How do we help them be successful in managing their team and leading their team? How do we give them the tools or coach them to be successful in getting the best from their team? Because I think the dynamic has changed from command and control to a lot more fluidity, and distributed workforce has made it even more challenging for leaders.
And it's the HR department actually teaches leaders how to lead from the bottom up, which is a really great tactic. I mean, there's so many organizations that lead from the top down and wouldn't even have a clue what the person on the floor is doing. So, I think HR departments help change that culture.
Well, and I think the best ones are focused on, when you think about every person needs to be a leader, whether it's leading themselves or whether it's leading others or whether it's leading organizations. So there's a set of skills and behaviors that you would expect to see. And I think if you wait to start building leadership skills till somebody's promoted to a supervisor role, you've waited too late.
I think so
you
too,
need to be building it from the beginning to say, here's what being a leader means, whether it's through influence, whether it's direct responsibility, but this is what our organization believes leadership's all about and how we value it.
Yeah. So how can organizations become more intentional in their, in their role as people persons?
I think it starts with understanding, a common agreement of like, what is the value of the people? How do they contribute? Like, do you have cultural statements that you actually live by? Like, I just did a LinkedIn audio recently where we talked about like culture is more than what you put on the walls or what you put in your handbook, et cetera. Like, you might say these are our values, these are our cultural attributes, but if that's not what people are experiencing every day, then that's not your culture. It's what you might want it to be. And so I think it starts with understanding, here's the environment we want to create. What are the things that we need to have in place? How do we be intentional of saying, hey, if collaboration is a key tenet of your organization, then you need to make sure that collaboration is valued. You need to make sure that it's part of your performance management or your rewards program, that people aren't pitted against each other, if that's what you're trying to create. So everything has to be in alignment to what your intention is, so that you can then create the impact that you want.
Yeah, exactly. And, organizations that are scaling too could take, some responsibility for, hiring at least one person who's fluent in HR processes, because I think it's an important role within an organization.
It is. And I think scaling organizations are interesting, particularly because if you're really small, and let's just say you have a large growth year, you're doubling your headcount, whether that's from 10 to 20 or 50 to 100 or 500 to 1,000, all of a sudden things start to change or need to change, because how you were leading that size organization is going to need to be different. The types of people you may go from needing vast generalists who can just get stuff done because you're in the startup mode and just everybody does everything and you figure it out, to when you start getting bigger, you need more specialists to do that. And so you might not have the right people anymore. You might need to use them differently. And you might not be hiring, know everybody. You may not interview everybody like you did before. And so from a culture perspective, what are the kinds of people that you want in your organization? How do you want them to talk about your organization? Becomes really important to figure out as a leadership team of who do we want to be and how do we make sure that can permeate throughout our environment, whether that's a distributed environment across the globe, whether it's across different cities, or whether it's in one location. I think it's really, really key. And so having somebody, whether they bring on an HR person, whether they use a consultant to help guide some of the culture, depending on the scale of the size of the organization, I think it's key to have that at least as a key part of the responsibility. You wouldn't probably not have a CFO. You probably wouldn't have a chief market. You wouldn't go without those things. So why going without a people person makes sense. I'm not always sure why that's the case.
Yeah, me either. I think the people, if you have a people and culture department, I think it can only help with moving the organization forward, and someone from that department can help you with your policies and procedures and
Right.
SOPs and processes, and put those into a document and save heaps of time. And any organization who doesn't have any of those documents really isn't running an efficient organization.
It will come out in the wash, as they say, as they scale, when they don't have those things in place. So I think you have to start industrializing a little bit as you scale.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we used to own a retail food outlet, and it was just after I did my HR degree, and I started writing all these policies and procedures, and the staff were just like dumbfounded, because they had to actually follow guidelines now rather than just doing what they wanted. And I actually made them sign off on it, to say that they'd read it. And that's also important too, that you include the staff in any policies and procedures that you make, because you may not be doing the job, but and you could write till the cows come home, but you need to involve staff in that. And a lot of organizations don't do that when they're doing their HR bits.
No, and I think that's important. I think it's also, a good example is if you're going to add a new program or change a benefit, to getting feedback from, key stakeholders like a line employee, the most junior employees, like, how is this going to impact? I had a personal experience where I was rolling out what I thought was the best policy, and I had leadership buy-in, but it didn't really hit as well as thought it was going to hit, because we didn't take into account some things that we weren't considering. And so I think making sure you're getting bottoms up input to anything you're trying to do, any change you're creating, I think is really important.
Oh, absolutely is, because they're the ones at the coalface, and the juniors will hopefully work their way up through the organization, and the junior staff, or the coalface staff, they're the ones who are doing the jobs, and no good running a policy and procedure if they're not included in the things, because they need to know that they're valued. I mean, and part of including them is showing them that they're valued.
Right.
So I guess, what are some steps that people can take to maybe establish a people and culture department?
I think it starts at the top. I mean, the CEO, COO, depending on how the company is organized, needs to look at it to say, this is important. Our people are our most important asset. I mean, to some extent, because if they're not there to sell the work, if they're not there to deliver the work, if they're not there to interface with the customers when they're unhappy, like, at the end of the day, that's your strategic differentiator. Obviously, your products matter, your services matter, et cetera. But if you don't have the right people doing it, you're not going to be competitive. And so I think that senior leadership team has to believe that way. And has to believe that an HR function or people and culture function is more than the person who's going to hire and fire, as you said, but that is going to be a partner to say, hey, as we're growing this business, here's some things we need to think about. Here are the risks that we need to consider. Here's the opportunities, and bring on the right type of person that is going to, take them to the level that they need to go to. But I think it starts at the top.
I think so too. I think they've got to make the decision, but getting that intentional mindset is not always easy for the leaders of the organization. And so as a people and culture, HR, personnel department leader, how do you change the mindset of the people that are making the decisions?
I think it probably depends on where their mindset is coming from, but I think one of the general perspectives is being able to show the business impact if they don't. We are losing 35% of our people every year. The cost of doing that is this much in retraining or rehiring, et cetera. Here's the business impact if we don't start changing and focusing on how do we retain people, how do we engage them. And so I think it's the business conversation of what's problem are we really trying to solve versus, hey, we really should do this program for these people because it's a really nice thing to do. It's coming at it from a different perspective. I think the other piece is you have to sort of start where people are. And so if leaders grew up in an environment where it was very much command and control, I tell you what you do, I expect you to do your job, I expect you to feel valued that you have a job, that type of mental, I remember leaders that I worked with that was their style. Like that's a hard one to change. I think sometimes you start seeing change as those people have children that are in the workplace and they go, oh, that person, my son or daughter has an awful boss. They're doing that. And then you start going, oh, wait a second. Am I doing that? I might be doing that. And you start seeing why you might need to change. But I think also external circumstances like COVID actually influenced a lot of people to start rethinking, how they showed up as a leader, as an employee, find a bit more of the empathy that wasn't maybe valued in the workplace, in their culture at that time, that all of a sudden needed to be valued. And so I think there are sometimes external circumstances that help us shift mindset. But you're going to find some people that are stubborn and don't want to change. And they're like, this is the way that I've done it. It worked for me. And we see it in the generational differences of just how we grew up makes a huge difference around how we expect things to work.
Yeah.
And so we have to learn from that.
Yeah, I agree. I worked for a government organisation for a number of years, and the people at the top had been there since they were 15, and they were, well into their 50s by the time I got there, and they were just so set in their ways. And when a HR department finally arrived, they just laughed at all the changes, just thought it was a waste of time and energy, and people should just do what I tell you, and and they wouldn't get into trouble because they were the leaders of the organization. Right. And you couldn't change them. It was really hard.
And sometimes you have to wait it out till they retire. Or you bring in a CEO that has a different mindset and culture that they want to create, and either deliver the message of, get in the boat with us, or exit. Sometimes that's the only thing that it takes for somebody to change.
Absolutely. What are some of the strategies, I guess, people can use if they're scaling their business to hire somebody from HR?
I think it's figuring out what you need. What level of maturity are you at? Do you already have maybe, most organizations have somebody maybe first that's doing recruiting, or they've outsourced payroll and benefits to somebody else. But if you're at that point where you are trying to make some strategic moves, I think identifying, what profile of HR professional, how strategic do you need them to be? Are they going to be very hands-on and doing payroll and benefits and recruiting at the same time? Or are you at the maturity level to say, hey, I want more of a chief HR officer, chief people officer to parallel with my chief marketing officer? But I think at the end of the day, if the voice of the people, if that's your HR department, isn't level with your CFO or your CMO or your, et cetera, you're going to have a challenge of just, that people are perceived as, the people department is perceived as less important. Mm-hmm. So finding the right stature of person that can help you lead your organization. And some organizations may not need dedicated strategic support. They may just be at a point where they need that recruiting and a learning team, et cetera. And so I think then you have an opportunity to bring in consulting or outsourced HR functions. A lot of that's available now too.
Mm, yeah, that's a good point. I think you can actually outsource your HR functions now, where before there weren't so many people around that you could rely on to
I think you can
consult.
outsource the operational pieces, some of the strategic, but if you really want it to align to your business, you're going to want somebody, even if it's outsourced, you're going to want somebody that really is in some part dedicated to your organization, who feels like they've got some vested focus with you, if that's the only person.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Melissa, where can people find you if they want to work with you or want to learn a little bit more about what you can offer?
So I think two places that I would highlight. One, my website, canopystrategies.co, gives you full sort of view of the services. And then follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me. I post daily on leadership and people strategy topics, do some LinkedIn audios, send some newsletters, et cetera. And so that's probably the best way to quickly find me.
Terrific. Yeah, newsletters are always a great source of information, I find. And if so, anyone that's looking to, better their business, I'm sure Melissa's newsletters are on fire and will give you the good goss. Melissa, if you could offer some words of advice to someone who was thinking of, hiring or outsourcing a part of their HR, what would you do? What would you say?
I think I would say find a partner, somebody that has this, particularly if you're outsourcing, has the same sort of values that your organization has. If you're hiring directly, that role is critical to be a partner with your senior leadership team. So find somebody who's going to fit nicely, but also is going to challenge the status quo, because you don't want an HR leader who just is an order taker. You want them to help write the news. You want them to be coaching and guiding and highlighting risk or opportunity. So you need somebody who's willing to challenge the leadership team and say, is this really what we want to be doing? Is this who we want to be as a company?
And you're offering our listeners a quiz on leading teams. Can you just say, let us know a little bit about what the quiz entails?
Yeah, it's a little bit around, it's very short and sweet. Quiz to just think about, how do you think about different scenarios with the people that you lead? What's the first thing? I think there's 3 options for each question around, when this situation comes up, what's your first reaction? And so after you take the quiz, it's going to come back and say, here's where you are from a mindset perspective, and give you some recommendations around things to consider.
Wonderful. Well, I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. Melissa, wonderful. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing with us the strategies around intentional mindset around people and culture and HR and personnel departments.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been lovely.
You've been listening to Talking with the Experts, hosted by Rose Davidson. Make sure you have a look at our back catalogue over at talkingwiththeexperts.com, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. We look forward to your company next time. Talking with the Experts.